everyone. Welcome to my show, Curryup Startup Podcast, a podcast to spotlight Asian leaders and interesting allies that I meet in my life. And today I have with me a very special guest, Marissa Levin, who's joining us from Washington, D.C., here in the US. Hey, Marissa, welcome to my show.
Hi. Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's a great day.
That's awesome, man. It's such a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C., and Marissa and I were like, hey, we need to be outdoors rather than here on the show, right? So thank you so much, Marissa, for taking your time to be part of our Curryup Startup Podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for doing this, giving entrepreneurs a platform and being able to educate others. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Marissa. So Curryup Startup Podcast to our listeners is focused on Asian entrepreneurs and inspiring leaders, but also allies who would be willing to share interesting wisdom to the Asian leadership community.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel you as a leadership expert could add a lot of value and thoughts to our community. So thank you so much for being again on our show.
Of course.
So Marissa, I'm going to get started with who you are. So Marissa is an entrepreneur. She's a speaker and a globally recognized growth strategist with almost 3 decades of experience under her belt. And Marissa's lifetime legacy mission is to educate, equip, and empower 100 million entrepreneurs and leaders with the skill sets and mindset they need to reach their greatest potential. That's a very inspiring vision, Marissa.
Well, I actually came up with the whole idea of lifetime legacy mission. I kind of made that up, and I really thought about the impact I wanted to make in the world. It's not something that is necessarily quantifiable. I'll never know if I'll address and impact 100 million. Excuse me. And that's 1/4 of the entrepreneurs that are actually in the world, by the way. There are actually 4 times the amount of 100 million entrepreneurs in the world. And my whole thing was that I wanted to impact 100 million, not only obviously directly, but, through venues like this show or through my writing or through my speaking, whatever it would be, the message that goes out there in the universe then trickles down to so many other people. And if I can help leaders live their best lives and step into their greatest potential, they end up leading better organizations. And so that's how the message gets out there to 100 million people.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And to our listeners, this is your host, Priyanka Komala today. And if you're thinking about why you need to listen to the show, I have 3 interesting aspects that I'm going to talk to with Marissa. One is, if you're a solopreneur, how do you grow a multi-million-dollar organization? Mm-hmm. And 2, if you're a business, the 3 critical most aspect of business growth is leadership development, strategy, and organization culture. And here's an expert who deals with all the 3 critical aspects of business growth.
Right.
And 3, and the most important of all, is the growing remote work culture amidst the pandemic. How do organizations position themselves? So those are the 3 critical things that we'll talk about. But more than that, I'm also going to unveil the real Marissa, who believes that she's just getting started, though she has 3 decades of experience under her belt. So Marissa, I know you grew up in Baltimore, here in Maryland, which is a neighboring place next to Washington, D.C. Tell us about your childhood experiences.
Sure. So I'm the youngest of 3. I have 2 older brothers who are 6 and 8 years older than I am. And I've always been someone, I think, who's very much of a free spirit. So very relationship driven, really from the get-go. I always had a lot of friends around me. Being with people was really important to me. I've always been a prolific communicator. I've always been a writer, whether it was fiction, nonfiction, poetry, just the gift of gab, I guess, and the gift of communication. It was kind of funny because I used to get in trouble a lot for talking when I was in elementary school. And I was actually told by our principal that if I silenced the chatter, I would perform miracles, which is a really good lesson because so often as children, we are programmed and we are directed to sometimes suppress our own gifts, right? And our ways in which really we can show up in the world and light up the world. And the truth is that if I would have listened to that type of feedback that I talk too much, that, I should be quieter, think about it. If I would have listened to that, then I probably wouldn't have brought my voice to the world. So I think it's really important. And I have two children. I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. And the way that has been really important to me to raise them is to make sure that they always know to step into their light. And one of the things I've always taught them is that you will be too much for some people, but remember that those aren't your people. So for me as a child, I was definitely raised by parents who really encouraged my self-expression, who really encouraged my individuality. I was definitely very different than my brothers. One is a doctor, one is an attorney. And then my father is actually an aerospace engineer at NASA. I was raised in a home of service. My father, working for NASA, was very mission driven. My mom, in her later part of her career, actually ran the largest AIDS and homeless shelter in Baltimore City. And both of them were extremely, extremely involved in our synagogue as leaders there. So spirituality was always a very central tenet to how I was raised, and service. And I find that, as an adult now, service and spirituality are actually a huge part of who I am and how I show up in the world.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Community engagement seems to be the fabric in the way your family upbringing happened. So thank you for, all the interesting wisdom that you shared. And the most important aspect, Marissa, is stepping into your own light, as you mentioned, and finding your voice and making sure that voice is heard, irrespective of all the naysayers you have surrounding yourself. So that's something, interesting that you shared with us.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, listening to your inner voice, but also knowing that sometimes that inner voice changes, right? And we were talking before we came on the show. I think, one of the epiphanies and realizations that I've recently had, even though I knew it, because I'm a huge Steve Jobs fan, and I followed a lot of what his teachings were, was that you can only really see how things connect, how the dots connect, when you look backwards. And that was something that he talked about a lot in the different speeches that he gave. And, here I am 30 years into my own journey, both personal and professional. When I say personal, I mean, I'm 53 years old, but my 30-year professional journey. And I can look back and I can really see how it all is coming together. And I really believe that I am just getting started. Like, there's so much more of an impact that I can be making in the world. And there's so many things that are unfolding before me, with professional opportunities, learning opportunities, community opportunities, impact opportunities. And I'm just really excited to step into all of that.
So you started your entrepreneurial journey back in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
What aspects of your childhood experience shaped you into becoming an entrepreneur, and that to a successful entrepreneur who's yet humble?
That's a really great question. And thank you for that wonderful compliment. Being told that I'm humble is definitely one of the most wonderful things that I could hear. So thank you for that. So that's a really good question, because my mom actually raised me and taught me to never let anyone else determine your value or your worth. And when I was working for a company prior to when I started my first company, that's actually exactly what happened. I was working for someone, and I was making them a lot of money, and I was growing with them. I mean, I was very young, so clearly I had a lot to learn at that point. But still, my value was still very high. And so when it became time for me to get my raise, and to go in there and have my performance review, I actually had engaged the help of a mentor, and he helped me build a business case and quantify what my value was in the organization based on my level of expertise, the fact that I had a master's degree, how much money I was making the company, the fact that they were billing me out on multiple jobs simultaneously. And I went in there with a very business sound recommendation of what I was worth in the marketplace. And he looked at me, the boss, the CEO of the company, and he said, "You'll never be worth more than $34,000 to my company." So at that moment, the lessons that I learned from my mom about never letting anyone determine or quantify your worth or your value, that's really when they kicked in. And that was the moment that I knew that I was not going to be staying at that company, and that I was going to launch my own company. And my undergraduate degree was in English with a concentration in Shakespeare. Again, getting back to the communication, the writing, and things of that nature. I didn't have a business background, but I knew that I was not going to stay in a place working for someone who didn't value me. And that really was kind of like the impetus for me starting my own company.
So let us talk about information experts, which is one of the experiences that you've had, a strategy
Mhm.
communications and education firm. And as a solopreneur, you grew it into a multi-million-dollar organization.
Mhm.
What is one advice you would give to an upcoming entrepreneur?
So it's really important to surround yourself with other people and to be comfortable with reaching out for help, because that's never a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength and it's a sign of growth. So having the right advisors around you, and that's why I wrote my first book, Built to Scale. It's really, really important to feel comfortable asking for help. And when I did start that company, the first thing that I did when I launched Information Experts is I defined my core values. So what is it that you stand for? What do you believe? What is your North Star, your moral compass? What behaviors will you tolerate and will you not accept? Who are you at your core? And if you don't know what you stand for, there's a saying, when we stand for nothing, we fall for anything. So it's really important to know what you stand for and build your company around those core values. And then know what your mission is. So why do you exist? Why are you building this company? And, for example, Information Experts is an education training and marketing communications company, right? That's not why we exist. We existed when I was running it to help other organizations fulfill their missions. And we did that through the creation and dissemination of excellently created education and communications products. Our mission was not to be a communications company or to design great training. Our mission was to help other organizations achieve their mission through the services that we provided. And that's very different. So really knowing what your core values are, your mission is, and your vision are, once you have those things defined, those become the foundation for your organization.
And that foundation piece is very critical for the success of any organization. And I think a lot of organizations are focusing on them, especially with the global pandemic. Everybody's trying to figure out what do they really stand for.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that. Now, talking about your book, you have it right over there. Oh,
Right
Build to
there.
Scale. There you go.
Yeah.
So Build to Scale is focused on how top companies create breakthrough growth through exceptional advisory boards.
Yes.
What's one takeaway that you can share with our listeners from your book?
Okay, so when companies want to surround themselves with advisors or build an advisory board, it's not the advisor's job to do what I just stressed. Like, it's not their job to create the values, create the vision, create the mission. Having your strategic plan in place before you go look for advisors is super important, and being very clear on who you need around you at the table. And that's part of the whole process that we lead our clients through that hire us to build advisory boards. But, I have a quote in there by Plato that says that the beginning is the most important part of the work. And the reason that I put that in there in the beginning is because there's a lot of upfront work that needs to happen before you go out and ask for help, because you need to know why you're asking for help in the first place. So it's doing that introspection that you need to know before you reach out.
Hey, Marissa, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We had a little bit of technical difficulty with our internet, but sorry about that glitch. And hopefully, we can get back to our question.
Sure. Yeah. I'm here.
Okay, let's go ahead. So, you believe in three critical aspects of business growth with leadership development, with strategy, and organization culture and assessment. Tell us one thing that organizations should do today to do a better job in each of these different dimensions.
So organizations today, I mean, that I'm going to really zero in on organizations today because it's a whole different ballgame for organizations who are, they're now leading and managing remote workforces, and they are leading in environments and times that this has never happened before. So the single most important thing that I would say is, critical for leadership is communication. The way leaders are communicating, the frequency of how they're communicating, really making sure that they are connected to their empathy and their compassion. It's just a whole different ballgame. My company, Successful Culture International, we do a lot of training on conscious and unconscious bias, recognizing that in the workplace and resolving that, emotional intelligence, communication strategies, leading remote work teams. We do a lot of online training on all of these. And having the skill sets around emotional intelligence, around recognizing unconscious bias, recognizing exclusion, behaviors, things of that nature, knowing how to communicate effectively in today's environment, it is absolutely the single most important skill set that a leader can have.
Thank you for sharing that interesting advice. Now, you have won several awards as a global influencer, as a trailblazer. How does it feel on all these different recognitions that you really deserve, I should say?
I mean, the awards are nice. They're definitely nice, but they're not, for me. They're not the most important thing. The most important thing for me is the impact that I can make and being able to be a role model for other entrepreneurs. However, I will say one thing about the awards. There were a couple particular awards that the thing that made them most meaningful for me. My mom has been gone now for over 6 years, 6.5 years. I lost my mom, and for any entrepreneur out there that's listening, that's rising and will be in the position of getting awards. If your parents are alive, take them to the award show. Let them come and experience it. That it really is why the awards for me were so valuable, because I was able to bring my mom to some of the award ceremonies, and she was able to see me be recognized. And that is what made those events so impactful and memorable for me, that she was so proud. And so much of who I am is because of my parents. And so for her to be able to experience that, and I'm 53. And so, my mom would have been 91 this year. And so when our parents were growing up, I mean, I launched my business, and there were very few women business owners or entrepreneurs anywhere. And so, our parents, my mom never had the opportunities that I have to launch a business and to have these types of award ceremonies. And so for her to be able to experience that of her daughter, it was truly a momentous time for her. And so that's why those awards were really the most valuable for me, because I could share it with my mom.
That's a very touching story, Marissa.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Has she ever shared with you how she felt about your success?
She did. I mean, like I said, she's been gone for 6 years, but yeah, she was very proud of me, and to be able to share that with her was tremendous. And my dad's proud of me too, and so it's meaningful.
No, I see you as a torchbearer for the next generation of people as well, like millennials as well. We feel proud about the work that you do. So thank you for continuing to inspire a lot of entrepreneurs as part of.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing it.
So I think this is a nice segue question for you, Marissa. You started your career at a time when there were very few women entrepreneurs back in the 90s. Tell us about your support system. I know your mom must have been a great source of support, but also I would love for you to share with our listeners how you kept your inner drive going, as you face the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur.
It was tough. You know what? It really was tough. I mean, we didn't have Facebook groups. We didn't have LinkedIn groups. I think for me, one of my favorite mantras in life is the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. So even back then, I mean, just the ability to do as much speaking as I possibly could to help other entrepreneurs coming behind me. I did a lot of speaking at my alma mater, University of Maryland. That's where I got my undergraduate degree. And they had a really, really good CEO and entrepreneurial program for undergraduate students called the Hinman CEO program. And I was a big part of that. And then I also guest lectured at their Smith Business School. So being engaged, I think, with students for me was really, really motivating, inspiring, and impactful. And I can't really say where the drive to build a company came from. I don't know. But I just know that I built it one project at a time and one impact at a time. And I had really good advisors around me to kind of help me navigate that. I don't think I could have done it without my advisors. So just, I'm all about letting life unfold the way it's supposed to unfold and trusting the process. And look, if I would have known all that I would have known, if I would have known it was going to be so hard, who knows if I would have done it. But I'm certainly really glad that I did.
Sometimes you have to let the universe unfold all the magic, right? That are going to come to you as part of the journey. Now, one thing I noticed in your career journey is the value of mentorship and having advisors. What's an advice that you would give to our listeners on creating a board of advisors and having constant mentorship as part of your career experiences?
So, I do a mindset masterclass on LinkedIn at 10 a.m. And I actually talked about the mindset of mentorship. And I also talked about the mindset of learning, and they both kind of go together. So, I view the classroom, I view the world as our largest classroom, right? Like I believe that in every moment we are in a place of learning. I mean, you're in a place of learning right now from me. I'm in a place of learning from you. Your listeners are in a place of learning from both of us. I believe in every moment we can be learning from others and we can be teaching others. And so I'm a seeker. I mean, I am constantly listening to audible books and reading, and I'm a seeker. So that's just the mindset that I have. And so I'm always going to be reaching out to people. And even, I had to create a document this morning that was a new type of business document that I created. And my thought was, who can I have review this for me? I just immediately went to, okay, I wrote this. Is there something I'm missing? Should I, should I take something out? My first thought literally was, who can I have review this for me? Who's in my inner circle that are my advisors that will help me? Because I truly believe that everybody has a desire to help, and we're all connected to one another. So for me, mentorship, advisory services, those types of things, they have to be an integral part of personal growth and of business growth.
I truly agree with the value of mentorship because it helps you see different perspectives, right? And it's a two-way street as well. You get to learn, the mentor gets to learn from you as well. So it's a nice way to give and take. So I would encourage all of us to seek mentorship, both in your personal and your professional journey. Now, Marissa, talk to us about work culture. Work culture is very important in today's organizations, and everybody's talking about this buzzword. But with COVID and remote work being the norm, how do you think organizations are shifting their cultures to adapt to the changing times?
So I'm really glad you brought up this question. Organizations, what has been thrust upon them is the need to shift their culture. I mean, whether you were a company that was already embracing remote learning, you were not embracing it in the way that it has shown up, right? Like even like for me, when I was building information experts, one of my core values was responsible flexibility. And the reason that I had that value is because I had two little kids and I needed to be flexible, right? So, you can't be hypocritical. You can't run an organization and say, oh, I have to leave at 4 o'clock, but you need to stay till 7. It's very important that there's an alignment between how the leader acts and what they expect their employees to do. So it's not, it's got to be, I walk the walk. I don't just talk the talk. And so for me, responsible flexibility was always a core value. And what that meant was that we hired people who had a really strong work ethic, and we didn't have the desire or the time to be a micromanager. So we had to have people in there who were very self-directed, who were committed to doing the business, but at the same time, our company recognized that work was a critical part of their life, but it was only one aspect of their life. And so when we had, when we were introducing telecommuting, and this was going back to the beginning of the 2000s, it was such a progressive idea. I mean, in the DC region, we were truly a trailblazer for that, and we were recognized for that as being on the edge of letting people do telecommuting. Your question now about, running an organization with a remote learning, a remote or, workforce or a remote culture, the thing that's so different about it now is that it's been forced upon companies overnight, right? So there hasn't been an opportunity to adapt. There hasn't been an opportunity to recruit people who will thrive in that environment. Whether you thrive in that environment or not, that's the environment you're in. And the other thing is that, when traditional companies allowed for remote learning, life was it was when life was quote unquote normal. Your kids were in school, right? Like you were at home working, your kids were in school, and you were living your life. You didn't have to worry about going places and catching, COVID, and you didn't have that stress of a pandemic. Now you're dealing with remote workers who may or may not have the space, like the actual physical space, to be doing remote learning. A lot of them are working out of spare bedrooms with compromised equipment, or they're working at a dining room table. And they're also dealing with helping their kids do online learning, and they're dealing with the fear and the uncertainty of a health pandemic. So this isn't like, oh, how do I figure out how to have a remote workforce and have a remote learning, remote culture? That nothing going on with any of this is normal. None of it's normal. So everything about building a culture in today's environment, it's never been done before. And it just requires leaders to really step up in a way that they're figuring it out as they go along. There's a lot of complexity to what's happening in the workforce today.
Very true, Marissa. I think there's a lot of learning curve for the organization, as well as the leadership, and for the staff as well, because we're trying to put our lives together, both from a physical space perspective, emotional well-being standpoint. So it's a very complicated situation to be in. But I think we're just adapting. As humans, it's the survival of the fittest norm, right? So we just have to get along and ensure we still live a happy and a peaceful life, being productive at the same time.
Right, but we're dealing with an environment that, and this is something that I'm talking, we've had these conversations with our clients. It's a very volatile environment right now. It's a very divisive and polarized environment right now. And so people are going to be coming back into the office, and they're coming from a place of fear. So, traditionally, companies have a roadmap. They have a playbook for how to take PTO, how to take maternity leave and paternity leave, how to take bereavement leave, how to take mental health days, how to take vacation. Like there's a playbook on how to do that. And it's all steeped in compliance, right? Where we are right now is there's no playbook for how to bring people back in this environment. And it's rooted in fear. It's so different, and it's so hard. And employees are going to be coming back, and they're going to be coming back with a lot of really, really firm opinions about what's happening in the world. right? They're going to have opinions about society and the unjustness that's going on in society. They're going to have opinions about the whole pandemic, running from the gamut of they need to be ultra conservative to this is a conspiracy theory. You're going to have people in the office on the entire spectrum. You're going to have people coming in the office that are completely divided in a way that's never been done, never seen before on the political spectrum. And so what that means is that leaders, and this is why the skills that we teach on emotional intelligence, communication skills, managing conflict, that's why those skills are so important. Leaders are being called to step up in a way to navigate conversations and to diffuse conversations in a way they have never, ever been called on before. There's a lot of frenetic energy that's going to be coming into the office that they've never had to deal with before. And it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds really from company to company.
That's very true. What's one advice that you're giving to your clients in terms of leadership, dealing with these complex challenges at work?
Well, the ones that are taking our training, I mean, we feel that we are equipping them with the skills that they need. Like, one of our training on communication strategies deals with something called the STAR feedback model. And it's a specific model on how you actually, assess a situation, how you reflect on it, how you provide feedback. We're providing, a lot of strategies on active listening. We're providing a lot of information on what emotional intelligence is and how leaders can show up, how they can demonstrate empathy and compassion and constructive listening. So for our clients that we're working with, we're equipping them with the tools that they need to be able to have those conversations and make sure that they're moving in a place of being responsive rather than being reactive. Those are the conversations we're having with our clients. So that's the awareness that leaders are going to need moving forward is how do I show up as a leader who, yes, I'm responsible for moving forward the organizational agenda and making sure that we're moving towards profitability and sustainability. But at the same time, how am I supporting my people in a way that we've never had to support them before? I mean, certain walls have been knocked down. Like, in the past, there was a barrier between leadership and employees, and there was separation, and now what's happening, like with all these Zoom calls and team meetings and all these other types of meetings online, there's just no separation. We're seeing into their families. We're seeing into their home life. We are more exposed and more transparent as human beings than we've ever been before in the work environment. And it just requires us as leaders to show up in an entirely different way.
It's a huge paradigm shift, both for the leadership as well as for the employees, given the pandemic, and as you mentioned, the society that we live in as well. So a lot of, different layers that we'll have to navigate, but hopefully, we're all in this together and we can sail through it and, get on with our lives as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, the generations coming up behind us, I mean, they're watching how we're handling this. Their norm, our disruption is going to become their norm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, now tell us this, Marissa, when you look back at your life personally, was there ever a low moment in your journey that you could share with our listeners?
Oh, that's a whole nother episode. There's so many low moments.
Is there one that you could share with us?
I mean, my company definitely hit a lot of rough patches, and there were times where we had to make really hard decisions. I mean, we existed through, the 9/11 attacks, which dramatically impacted our business, the implosion of the telecom industry, the internet industry, the housing industry, the automotive industry. I've had 2 cancer scares. My children have gone through difficulty. I've lost my mother and my stepmother, and life just kind of happens. And so, there have certainly been a lot of low moments throughout my journey. I reach back to my own personal circles of support. My spirituality practices, as you know, I do a lot of meditation and gratitude work and mindfulness work, and truly learning how to trust the process and recognize that I'm part of something so much bigger than myself, and just doing that spiritual work. I mean, that's really has been kind of like my grounding force.
I couldn't agree more. But thank you so much for, sharing things that have been so close to you and being open about, how you just have to get through life.
Yeah.
And you have a smile on your face. No, that's the best part about Marissa. She's, as I rightly mentioned, she's so humble, irrespective of her success. And I think the grounded force in her is clearly shown through this podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And also I just want to take a moment to mention the importance of mental health. I am very, very open about my own mental health journey. I have had situational depression and anxiety, whether it's been personal or professionally, and activated. And I'm going to put it out there. I have been in therapy on and off for 15 years. I mean, my therapy and my counseling, my therapist is a lifeline for me. And so right now, I know that we are going through so much stress, so much uncertainty, so much anxiety. And if there's really anything that I can leave our viewers and listeners with, it's the knowledge that asking for help is a sign of self-love. It's a sign of strength. It's a sign of wanting to be our best selves. There's never anything that someone should feel shame about or embarrassment about. I am very, very proud of myself to surround myself with the help I need, whether that's my community of friends, my family, my spiritual practices, my therapy that I depend on. I am all about making sure that I can do what I can to be a light in this world for others, and that means engaging in my own self-care and my own self-love. So I wanted just to put that out there.
Marissa, self-love is very critical because we have to put ourselves first. Putting your own oxygen mask first, right? When you're in a plane, as part of the plane safety measure, that's the first thing that they tell you, right? And that's something that we find it very hard to do because we play multiple roles, and especially for women, I think our self-care and self-love is last on a list of things to do. But now, I think it's a perfect time for us to introspect and put ourselves first.
Yeah, we can't pour from an empty cup, so we have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves.
True. That brings us to the next best question we have for you. It's, what is the legacy you want to leave behind?
Well, okay. That's a complicated question because I have a lot I want to be able to leave behind. But first and foremost, I have two sons, ages 20 and 23. And the single most important thing that has driven my life, honestly, is that they are emotionally healthy and whole men, so that when they grow up and they have, they're young adults now, that they have healthy relationships and they know how to treat women with love and compassion and respect, and that they grow up, to be husbands and fathers that then pass that on. And so raising two men, that are emotionally healthy and whole and are connected to a larger world, and community around them, and know that they have an obligation to give back and to be part of something bigger than themselves. Really, that's the single most important legacy. Because if I've built great companies and I've made good money and I've done all of that, those types of things, but I've raised children who, are only about themselves, that to me is a failure. So definitely raising two men that are emotionally healthy and whole and connected to the world around them. That's my single most important legacy. Aside from that, for me, I'm very committed to women, making sure that they have the resources and the skills and the communities and the mindsets to be able to step into their own power, to move from what I call suppression and oppression to expression, to move from stagnation to momentum, from fear to faith. I want to do what I can to help women in both personal and professional environments really step into their power and not allow themselves to be suppressed, to know that they are here to live a life of joy and significance and that they have a lot to offer. And in fact, I am going to be getting involved with a nonprofit called No Silence, No Violence. And it is an organization that helps women and families who have been victims of domestic abuse and helping them kind of, heal and step into their own light. So helping women with that is really important to me, just to make sure that they can always step into their joy and find their voice and assert their power.
That's truly inspiring, Marissa. Thank you for being a torchbearer, as I rightly mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. I think women need a lot of support from other women in terms of uplifting each other. And I think having people like you really helps us, the next generation of young women to feel that, hey, you can step into your own shoes and have your inner voice and succeed in life in a way that you've dreamt.
Yeah. So I'm honored to be able to do that work.
Thank you. So we have a fun rapid fire round for you. Are you ready for that?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following.
Okay.
Role model.
Role model. My father is a role model for me.
Favorite book, apart from the 2 books that you've authored?
So I would say The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is probably my favorite.
It's my favorite too. What does happiness mean to you?
Happiness means, let's see, I think I'm feeling fully connected to others, and I would say the word love. That's what happiness means to me, love.
What is the one thing that you wish you did differently in your 3 decades of career?
I wish I had more confidence in myself in the early years.
It's part of connecting the dots, right? As you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What is your native language and one word to describe yourself in it?
Can you say that again?
What is your native language and one word to describe yourself in it?
Do you mean my native language being English?
Mm-hmm. And one word to describe yourself in English?
Love.
Thank you, Marissa. So that was Marissa Levin, entrepreneur, speaker, author. Thank you so much for sharing your interest and wisdom about your career, 3 decades of career experience, but also your personal self. So 3 important key takeaways that I always share with my listeners. And from this episode are, one is, as women, we should dictate our value rather than looking out for others to tell what we deserve. And 2, and the most important of all, is ask for help, be it through your mentorship, surrounding yourself with a board of advisors who would help you both in your personal and professional journey. And 3, and the most important of all is, for women especially, is step into our own power, and, dream the life that you want and live it to the fullest with joy. Thank you so much, Marissa, for being on our show. And to our listeners out there, I hope you found this episode to be very interesting with Marissa, and I hope you could join us on another interesting episode with another interesting guest. Until then, this is your host, Priyanka Komala, signing off from Curryup Startup Podcast, a podcast to spotlight Asian leaders and interesting allies like Marissa. Thank you.